You know that feeling when you're just staring down a wildly unpredictable quarter? Like your team is stressed, the market is completely volatile, and you finally just pull up the quarterly dashboard.
Oh, yeah, the dashboard.
Right. You look at those key performance indicators, the KPIs, and you see this like solid green arrow pointing up. And there's this actual physical sense of relief.
It's incredibly soothing. I mean, it really
It
is.
is. As a manager, you can just point at the screen, take a breath, and say, well, okay, there it is. That's our reality. We're doing fine.
Right, because the chaos of human behavior and market dynamics, it all gets distilled down into something binary and concrete. Up is good, down is bad.
Exactly.
It gives you this sense of control over an environment that is, frankly, entirely out of your control.
Yeah, we lean so heavily on that old business adage, right? The numbers speak for themselves. But then you actually, step out of your office or you jump on a call with an employee who's struggling or you try to parse a massive corporate sustainability report.
Good luck with that.
Right. And that pristine mathematical landscape starts to look completely distorted. You realize the numbers aren't speaking for themselves at all.
Not even a little bit. I mean, we are essentially functioning in diagnostic muddy waters every single day.
Yeah.
The reality is that numbers are completely mute until we build an elaborate and often invisible infrastructure to make them speak. And quite frequently, the story they tell us is a highly curated fiction.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this is so fundamental to how we run our organizations. If you're a seasoned manager out there, prepping for your next executive offsite, or maybe an aspiring leader who's suddenly been tasked with designing like an employee evaluation system.
Which is terrifying.
Truly terrifying. Or even if you're just insanely curious about the inevitable architecture of the corporate world, this deep dive is designed to change how you interact with every single spreadsheet you ever open.
Absolutely.
We're looking at a massive stack of sociological, economic, and management research today, digging into the hidden power, the intense politics, and the outright dangers of quantification.
Yeah, we're going to explore how the seemingly innocent act of turning a human quality into a number fundamentally reshapes reality.
Right.
We'll get into the disciplinary mechanics behind global sustainability ratings, the psychological toll of something researchers call indicatorism.
Which is a fascinating concept.
It really is. And we'll even look at the ultimate quantification challenge our species has ever attempted, which is putting a single dollar price on the social cost of carbon.
So throw out whatever assumptions you have about objective data. Because to really understand why a dashboard holds such immense psychological power over a management team, we need to look at the very foundation of how human beings measure the world.
Right at the root of it.
Exactly. I want to start with the foundational work of sociologists Wendy Nelson Espeland and Mitchell L. Stevens. In their research from 1998 and 2008, they introduced this core concept called commensuration.
Commensuration.
Yeah, which is a heavy academic word, but it describes this like alchemy that every manager performs daily.
It is. And commensuration is one of those concepts that once you see it, you honestly can't unsee it in your daily life. It's defined as the transformation of entirely different qualities into a common metric.
So it's not just measuring.
No, it goes way beyond just the act of measuring something. It's the brute force act of taking completely disparate, fundamentally different things and forcing them onto a single scale of magnitude so they can be compared.
Right.
Think about how we use utility or price or cost-benefit ratios.
So Esplin and Stevens make a brilliant distinction here that I think clears this up perfectly for me. They draw a hard line between numbers that mark and numbers that commensurate.
And that difference is everything. Let's look at numbers that simply mark or identify something. The classic, universally understood example is the Dewey Decimal System in a library.
Okay, yeah.
When Melville Dewey created that system in the 1870s, his goal wasn't to evaluate the books, it was just to find them.
Right, to organize the physical space.
Exactly. So if a book has a Dewey Decimal number in the 300s, it means it's about social sciences. If it's in the 600s, it's about technology.
So the number is essentially just a geographical coordinate on a bookshelf.
Exactly. It distinguishes categories, but it deliberately avoids assigning any magnitude of value. Like, a book in the 600s is not mathematically superior to a book in the 300s.
Right. It's not twice as heavy or twice as well written.
Exactly. The numbers mark a difference, but they don't claim that one is more than the other.
It's kind of like the numbers on a football field. The quarterback wears number 12, the tight end wears 87. You would never look at the field and say, well, the tight end is performing at an 87, which is vastly superior to the quarterback's 12.
Right.
The number is just a label. An IP address on a computer network is exactly the same thing. But commensuration is a totally different beast.
Because when we commensurate, we assign a magnitude that claims to make fundamentally different things mathematically comparable. Take a student's grade point average, the GPA.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Think about the wild variety of human experiences a teenager goes through in high school. You have their performance in AP Calculus, their deeply personal essay in creative writing, their physical endurance in gym class, their collaborative skills in a group history project.
So many different variables.
Right. And commensuration takes all of those vastly different qualitative experiences, crushes them down, and spits out a single number, a 3.8.
And suddenly, that complex human being can be ranked on a spreadsheet against thousands of other complex human beings by a university admissions officer who has never even met any of them.
Exactly. Or take pricing in a market economy. Price is the ultimate commensurator.
How so?
Because of dollars and cents, you can legitimately compare the value of an hour of a corporate lawyer's time to the value of a 65-inch flat-screen television.
That's wild when you put it like that.
Right. They have absolutely nothing in common, yet they can both be expressed as $500.
Which brings up a really fascinating historical and philosophical tension. Like, why do we feel this overwhelming urge to do this? We treat commensuration like it's a modern invention of corporate capitalism, but this debate goes all the way back to ancient Greece.
It really does. Plato actually saw commensuration as the ultimate salvation for human rationality.
He thought it was the cure for chaos, right?
It did. Plato looked at the messiness of human decision-making, the way our passions and our biases cloud our ethical choices. And he hated it.
Because it's so subjective.
Exactly. He argued that if we could translate complex ethical and social choices into a common standardized metric, we could eliminate confusion. He wanted moral choices to be as simple and undeniable as looking at a stack of $50 bills and a stack of $200 bills.
Right. You don't have to agonize over which stack is worth more. The math just decides for you.
Precisely. For Plato, commensuration removes the irrational passions from the human experience.
But then you have his student, Aristotle, who looked at that exact same concept and was utterly horrified by it.
Aristotle deeply feared commensuration. His philosophy was built on the idea that goodness, passion, and human relationships are inherently fragile and completely dependent on the unique, incommensurable qualities of a specific situation.
Context is everything for him.
Context is everything. To Aristotle, if you start treating a moral duty or a human relationship as just a generic number on a ledger, a unit that can be swapped out for any other equal unit, you destroy the very essence of what makes it valuable in the first place. You obliterate its uniqueness.
You know, this philosophical divide, it reminds me of a classic sci-fi trope. Commensuration is exactly like the universal translator you see in space operas.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Right, because you have this miraculous piece of technology that allows completely different alien species from across the galaxy to communicate, negotiate, and trade with each other.
Yeah.
It makes a galactic economy possible. But in the process of translating these rich, complex alien languages into a flat, common, standardized English, all the poetry is lost. The nuance, the historical context, the subtle emotional inflections of the original language are completely stripped away. It's incredibly efficient, but it's soulless.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. And that deliberate stripping away of the soul for the sake of efficiency is exactly what modern sociological critics have been warning us about for over a century.
Like who?
Well, if you look at Karl Marx, his entire critique of capitalism is fundamentally a critique of commensuration. He introduced this idea of abstract labor.
Okay, let's contextualize that for someone running a modern business. What does abstract labor actually look like?
Marx pointed out that before industrial capitalism, labor was concrete. If you were a shoemaker, your labor was deeply tied to your specific skills, your mood, the quality of the leather you chose that day, your unique creative flair.
It was artisanal.
Yes. But under industrial capitalism, the system strips away all those specific, unique qualities. Your unique effort is transformed into abstract labor. It becomes just a standardized unit of time and effort, an hourly wage.
Right. The system doesn't care about your creative flair. It cares that you sold 1 hour of your life for $20.
Exactly. Your human energy is commensurated into a commodity that can be bought and traded on a market.
And Max Weber picked up on this too, right? But he focused more on the bureaucratic side of it, like the depersonalization of the office itself.
Weber was obsessed with the rise of rational capital accounting, which is basically the precursor to the modern corporate spreadsheet. He saw it as the ultimate tool of depersonalization.
How so?
Think about a traditional family business. A manager might keep an employee on the payroll even if they were struggling because they knew the employee's family or they knew they were going through a hard time.
There was a human connection.
Right, but rational accounting allows a business owner to look at their operations objectively. The spreadsheet doesn't know about the employee's sick child. It just sees a negative return on investment.
Yeah.
And George Simmel took it even further, arguing that the constant use of money as a common metric trains our brains to be calculating, detached, and intellectually distant from the actual physical things we interact with.
So, putting my manager hat on, I'm listening to this and thinking, okay, Plato thought it was a cure for chaos, Aristotle thought it destroyed our humanity, and Marx and Weber warned us that it turns us into detached cogs in a machine.
Right.
If we know that commensuration strips away so much crucial context, if we know we're losing the poetry of the actual work being done, why is modern management so utterly addicted to it? Why do we demand a dashboard for everything?
Because of the two things it gives us in return.
Earning.
Immense control and massive cognitive efficiency.
Cognitive efficiency, yeah.
Think about the sheer scale of modern business. Commensuration absorbs uncertainty. If you are a regional director overseeing 500 employees across 3 different countries, you cannot possibly know the nuanced, qualitative, Aristotle-level details of every single employee's daily struggles and triumphs.
No, your brain would literally break. It's too much information.
Exactly. Commensuration acts as a massive data compressor.
It compresses a gigabyte of messy, complex human experience into a clean 1 kilobyte number on a performance review.
Yes. But beyond just cognitive ease, it creates something incredibly powerful, what the historian Theodore Porter calls mechanical objectivity.
Mechanical objectivity, what is that in practice?
Imagine a scenario where a decision is highly politicized, or where trust between a company and the public is practically zero. You can't just stand up and say, trust my gut feeling as a manager, this is the right move.
Right, people will tear you apart.
You need a shield. Mechanical objectivity replaces personal discretion with standardized mathematical rules. It allows for automated, depersonalized decision-making that you can confidently defend in a tense boardroom or even a courtroom.
Oh, it's the ultimate deflection of responsibility.
Exactly.
It's like, listen, I didn't want to cut the bottom 10% of the sales team, but the performance algorithm demanded it. The numbers made the decision, my hands are tied.
Exactly. It protects the manager from the emotional and political fallout of leadership. It's a defense mechanism masquerading as a management tool.
Okay, so we've established the philosophy of what commensuration is, this powerful, sometimes dangerous alchemy of turning human qualities into comparable quantities.
Right.
But that brings up a huge logistical problem. How do we actually convince thousands of employees or millions of citizens to look at those numbers and believe they are true?
It takes work.
Right, because a number is just a squiggle on a screen unless people collectively grant it authority. And the research shows that granting that authority requires an unbelievable amount of hidden labor.
This is one of the biggest blind spots in modern management. We are conditioned to view numbers as objective artifacts that just exist out in the wild, like rocks or trees, and we just stumble upon them and record them.
Yeah, like they just organically happen.
But Espeland and Stevens, pulling from deep sociological research, remind us that numbers are entirely manufactured. They require vast, expensive, fragile infrastructures to produce and maintain.
I think about something like a country's gross domestic product, the GDP. We talk about it like it's the temperature outside.
Right.
But before the 1930s, the GDP didn't even exist. It took an army of economists during the Great Depression to invent the concept, define the parameters, and build the reporting mechanisms just to figure out how bad the economy was crashing.
That's a perfect example. Or on a corporate level, think about rolling out a new 360-degree employee evaluation system across a global enterprise.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
Think about what it takes to generate that single employee performance score.
Oh.
You need legions of metricians, data analysts, software engineers, HR, middle managers.
Yeah.
You have to write standardized rubrics that somehow make sense to a software developer in Berlin and a marketing executive in Tokyo.
Right. The alignment alone is staggering.
You need to train everyone on how to input the data. And most importantly, you need massive political muscle from the executive suite to force everyone to actually comply with the system and fill out the forms.
So true.
When a multinational corporation launches a new KPI dashboard, it is a staggering organizational undertaking. That little green arrow on your screen doesn't just appear. It is the final, polished product of an enormous, mostly invisible factory of human labor.
And once that number finally rolls off the assembly line and lands on a manager's desk, how do people process it? Because not everyone looks at data the same way.
No, they don't.
The sources bring in the work of Alain de Rosière, a brilliant statistician who mapped out how people grant authority to numbers. He outlined 4 specific attitudes, or realisms.
Oh, the 4 realisms.
I'd love to walk through these by imagining a scenario. Let's say a company just rolled out a massive new customer relationship management software, a new CRM, to track sales efficiency. How do these 4 realisms play out in that office?
That's a great way to frame it. De Rosière's first attitude is metrological realism.
Metrological.
Right. This is the perspective of the pure statistician or the data scientist who built the CRM's algorithm. They care passionately about the measurement theory itself.
Okay, so the methodology.
Yes. They are focused on whether the metric accurately, scientifically, and flawlessly reflects the messy physical or social reality it's trying to capture. They will argue for wits about the exact weighting of variables in the algorithm to ensure it's as close to truth as possible.
So the data engineers are in a conference room having a metrological debate about whether a 2-minute phone call should carry the same weight as a 10-minute email thread. They care about the purity of the measurement.
Exactly.
What's the second attitude?
The second is accounting realism. This is usually the finance department or the compliance team, and they operate in a completely different mental space.
Because they just want the books to balance.
Exactly. The accountant doesn't necessarily care if the category perfectly describes human nature or the nuances of the sales process. They care that the internal ledger is consistent.
Right.
If the rigid rules of the CRM system are followed and the numbers add up correctly within the closed logic of that system, the number is considered real.
They don't care if the map perfectly matches the territory. They just care that the map doesn't have any tears in it. Like, I don't know what this salesperson actually said on the phone, but the revenue numbers are in the right column, so the data is valid.
Precisely. Now, the third attitude is where the vast majority of corporate leaders live. Proof in use.
Proof in use.
This is when a middle manager or an executive takes a data set generated by the CRM, exports it into a chart, and uses it to make an argument or force a decision. And crucially, they do this without caring at all about the metrological purity or the accounting consistency.
Oh, I've seen this 1,000 times. A VP of sales grabs a chart from a slide deck, points to a rising trend line, and uses it to demand a 20% budget increase from the CEO.
Yep.
They completely ignore the tiny footnote at the bottom that says the data only represents a highly skewed sample size of 3 clients over a 2-week period. For that VP, the number is real, simply because it is a useful weapon to achieve their immediate political goal in that meeting. The utility of the number validates its reality.
It's the ultimate pragmatist approach, and it drives data scientists crazy.
I bet.
And finally, de Rosière outlines the fourth attitude, the constructionist view. This is the sociological perspective. It's the deeper understanding that statistics don't just act as passive cameras measuring reality. They actually help create the reality they are measuring.
Wait, how does a metric create reality?
Think about a personal credit score. The FICO score was just a manufactured metric created by a corporation in the 1980s. But once that number was unleashed into the world and adopted by banks, it gained immense power.
All right.
Now, that manufactured number determines what neighborhood you can live in, what kind of car you can drive, your interest rates, and the level of debt you carry. The metric didn't just measure a borrower's reliability. It created a totally new economic and social reality for the person being measured.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy encoded in math.
Exactly.
And here's where the mechanics of all this get really interesting to me. Earning that authority, getting people to believe in the number, isn't just about the math or the methodology. It's heavily dependent on how the number is dressed up.
The packaging.
Yes, it's about the aesthetics. The sources highlight the legendary work of Edward Tufte and William Cleveland, who are basically the godfathers of the visual display of quantitative information.
Oh, Tufte's work is essential here because he argues that the presentation of numbers is an aesthetic craft, and that craft directly manipulates our perception of truth.
Right.
The authority we grant to a piece of data is heavily influenced by how it is graphically displayed on a page or a screen. We are highly visual creatures.
So true. We've all been in presentations where a beautifully designed, sleek, minimalist chart just fundamentally feels more true and authoritative than a cluttered, messy spreadsheet, even if the underlying data in the messy spreadsheet is actually more accurate.
Tough Day advocates fiercely for two graphic ideals: clarity and parsimony. He is famous for his absolute hatred of what he coined chart junk.
Chart junk, I love that term.
Chart junk, or what he sometimes calls non-data ink. Tough Day argues that any drop of ink on a page or any pixel on a screen that does not directly communicate a piece of data is a dangerous distraction.
So like heavy grid lines, fake 3D effects on pie chart.
Yes, unnecessary drop shadows, distracting color gradients, corporate clip art in the margins. All of this chart junk obscures the mathematical truth. A manager presenting data should aggressively strip away the noise, embrace negative space, and let the pure quantitative relationship speak directly to the viewer's brain.
But the sources point out something fascinating here. Even a beautifully clean, parsimonious chart 1 with zero chart junk can be so aesthetically compelling that it fundamentally alters how we view human beings. There's a very specific, famous example of this from 1967, the Blau and Duncan model.
This is a landmark moment in sociology. Peter Blau and Otis Dudley Duncan published a massive study on the American occupational structure, and embedded in this book was a path diagram.
Okay.
It was a visual map attempting to show the statistical relationship between a father's level of education, a son's level of education, and the son's eventual occupational status.
Right. And if you look at it visually, it's incredibly austere. It's just simple text nodes connected by thin arrows with small decimal numbers hovering over them.
Right.
It's the definition of parsimony.
But the impact of that simple graphic was revolutionary. Before this, sociology relied heavily on dense narrative descriptions of human life. By rendering something as complex and deeply personal as education into a single node in a causal mathematical model, Blau and Duncan effectively reontologized it.
Reontologized?
Yeah, they changed the very nature of what education was understood to be within the discipline.
It stopped being a messy, qualitative, lifelong journey of human development and enlightenment.
Yes. Visually and statistically, it became a discrete, measurable possession. It became a standardized commodity that an individual acquires, accumulates, and eventually trades on the market for occupational status. That single chart, because the aesthetic of the causal math was so clean and compelling, fundamentally shifted the trajectory of American sociology.
But Duncan himself, later in his career, actually looked back on this trend and issued a severe warning about the dark side of this mathematical aesthetic.
Yeah.
He coined the term statisticism.
Duncan realized the monster he had helped create. He defined statisticism as the dangerous, widespread delusion that computing numbers is synonymous with doing actual research.
Oh, wow.
It's the false belief that if you take a bunch of arbitrary, messy social variables, dump them into a complex software program, and generate a beautiful, parsimonious causal model with multiple decimal points, you have somehow discovered an absolute law of nature.
It's the illusion of precision. I see this in business all the time.
Right.
A dashboard will tell a manager that overall employee productivity is exactly at 84.32%. The mere presence of those decimal points gives it this aesthetic of hard, irrefutable science.
Yes.
But if you dig into the methodology, you find out the underlying data was entirely based on a highly subjective, vaguely worded pulse survey that employees click through as fast as possible on a Friday afternoon. The aesthetic of the math hides the flimsiness of the data.
And that illusion of precision leads us into one of the most dangerous traps in modern management. Managers invest all this hidden labor to manufacture metrics. They dress them up in beautiful, tough-to-approved dashboards to grant them unquestionable authority.
Right.
But they forget one crucial variable. What happens when the human beings being measured figure out the rules of the game?
Oh, right.
What happens when intelligent employees start adapting their behavior to serve the metric rather than actually doing the job the metric was supposed to measure?
This is where the wheels completely fall off the wagon. If you tell me as an employee that my annual bonus, my mortgage payment, and my promotion depend entirely on hitting a specific number, I am going to hit that number.
Of course you are.
And if I have to bend reality or ignore the actual mission of the company to do it, I will.
This phenomenon is known in the sociological literature as reactivity. As we established, measures are not passive cameras taking a snapshot of the world. They are active, aggressive interventions. They change the world they depict.
Yeah.
Ian Hacking, the philosopher of science, describes this dynamic with a chilling phrase: making up people.
Making up people. How exactly does a metric make up a person? Let's ground that.
So earlier we mentioned the French sociological category of the cadres salaried executives.
Right.
In the early 20th century, that wasn't a distinct identity. It was just a loose, vague social movement of middle managers who felt squeezed between the working class and the owners. But once the French government formally incorporated cadres as an official statistical category in their national census, it took on massive cultural weight. People started identifying strongly as cadres, they formed unions as cadres, they voted as cadres.
Oh, wow.
The mere act of measuring the group brought the group into solidified existence. The metric created the identity.
The sources also bring up Alfred Kinsey's famous mid-century research on human sexuality.
A perfect example of unintended reactivity. Kinsey actually created his famous 0 to 6 scale to measure a spectrum of behavior.
Right, he's looking at actions.
Exactly. He specifically argued in his work against locking people into rigid, binary identity categories of homosexual and heterosexual, noting that human behavior was highly fluid.
Yeah.
But ironically, the cultural absorption of his metrics completely backfired on his intent. Society grabbed onto the numbers and used them to inadvertently solidify those very identity categories he was trying to dismantle.
So the measurement tool, once unleashed, reshaped societal identity entirely on its own.
Yeah.
So we know that metrics fundamentally change us. And when you drop that reactivity into a high-pressure business context, it breeds a deeply toxic organizational disease. I want to bring in some fascinating recent research from Baron van der Kolk in 2022.
Yes.
He coined a term for this specific corporate disease: indicatorism.
Indicatorism is a brilliant, highly useful concept for any manager. Van der Kolk defines it as the phenomenon where improving the performance indicator itself becomes the primary overriding goal of the employee.
Replacing the actual work.
Completely replacing and often cannibalizing the actual organizational objective that the indicator was originally designed to represent.
It's the classic catastrophic mistake of confusing the map for the territory.
Yeah.
The map becomes more important than the actual land you're standing on.
Exactly.
Let me share this startling anecdote from van der Kolk's research because I think it will resonate deeply with anyone who has ever been forced to hit a KPI. It's about the police force in the Netherlands.
Ah, the crime fighters. This is a textbook case of indicatorism.
So, a few years ago, the Dutch Minister of Justice held a press conference and proudly announced to the public that high-impact crimes, things like violent assaults and home burglaries, had dropped spectacularly across the country.
The numbers looked great.
The numbers on the government dashboard look amazing.
Yeah.
The policies were working. But when investigative journalists eventually dug into the methodology, they found rampant systemic indicatorism.
Oh, yeah.
The regional police units were being aggressively evaluated and funded based on this specific KPI, reducing high-impact crimes.
Yeah.
So to make their numbers look better to the bosses in the capital, local officers on the street started actively reclassifying crimes.
Right. Imagine a scenario where a burglar breaks a window, enters a family's home, searches the living room for valuables, but gets spooked by a dog and runs away without actually stealing anything.
Under normal circumstances, that is clearly an attempted burglary, which is classified as a high-impact crime. It's traumatizing for the family. But under the pressure of the KPI, the police would write up the report and classify the event merely as destruction of property, focusing solely on the broken window.
Because destruction of property is a low-impact crime.
Exactly. It doesn't trigger the KPI. So on the minister's dashboard, high-impact crime is plummeting. Everyone is celebrating. But the reality on the streets hasn't changed one bit. People's homes are still being broken into. The reality was totally masked by the metric.
And this happens in mundane corporate environments constantly, often with devastating effects on equity. Van der Kolk's field studies also highlighted front office workers, specifically customer service representatives dealing with the public.
Okay, what were they doing?
Their performance was being heavily monitored by a very standard, ubiquitous call center indicator, average time spent per client.
Keep the call short, keep the line moving, maximize throughput.
The organizational goal, ostensibly, was to provide efficient, helpful customer service to everyone. But the result of the indicatorism was insidious. Because the workers were terrified of their average handle time creeping up, they began actively avoiding clients they perceived as difficult or complex.
Oh, no.
The research specifically noted that workers would routinely ignore or deprioritize clients with foreign-sounding names.
Because they anticipated a potential language barrier or cultural misunderstanding might make the interaction take 5 minutes instead of 2.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
So, in the blind pursuit of mathematical efficiency, the metric inadvertently incentivized and systematized discriminatory behavior.
it did.
The workers were literally sacrificing the core mission of the organization, serving the public equitably, just to keep their personal average time low on the dashboard.
Which brings us to the most critical question a manager can ask.
Ah,
What are the true holistic costs of this kind of relentless performance measurement? Because the costs go far beyond just operational inefficiencies. They're deeply human and structural.
Right.
Van der Kolk breaks these costs down into 3 distinct levels: individual, organizational, and societal. Let's start with the individual employee.
what happens to the human brain under this kind of surveillance?
For the individual, relentless quantification creates immense chronic stress and deep goal conflict. It breeds profound alienation. By quantifying every microscopic aspect of an employee's output, organizations turn their people into what sociologists call hyper-competitive achievement subjects.
Achievement subjects.
The employee is caught in a never-ending, often global competition, constantly comparing their numbers to their peers. Their worth is entirely tied to a fluctuating decimal point, which comes at a severe, documented expense to their mental health and overall well-being.
They burn out because they can never just do the work. They always have to perform the metric.
Exactly.
And organizationally, the costs are just as steep, if not steeper. Indicatorism drives massive short-termism. If I'm an employee, I am going to completely ignore critical, unmeasured tasks like mentoring junior staff, fixing long-term systemic bugs, or building deep, trusting client relationships.
Because there is no KPI for those things.
Exactly. I won't get promoted for being a good mentor.
Right.
And, as we saw with the Dutch police, the pressure eventually leads to the outright manipulation and falsification of data.
Yeah.
The organization essentially loses touch with its own reality because it's suffocating under a blanket of fake numbers.
Right. And finally, at the highest societal level, we see a dangerous reductionism take hold. When we reduce complex, multifaceted phenomena to single, easily digestible metrics, we become blind to the bigger picture.
Right.
Imagine a society that decides to measure its overall environmental health solely by a single indicator, like carbon dioxide output. They might heavily incentivize policies that achieve that specific CO2 goal while simultaneously and blindly destroying local biodiversity, polluting rivers, or displacing vulnerable indigenous communities.
Simply because those massive harms weren't captured by the dominant metric.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to step in and push back here.
Sure.
I am putting my manager hat firmly back on. I hear all of this. I see the dangers of indicatorism. I see the anxiety it causes my team. But I need to evaluate my people.
Of course.
I have fiduciary duty to the company. I have to decide who gets the limited bonus pool, who gets promoted, and who gets put on a performance improvement plan. I have a strict budget to hit. If indicators are causing all this damage and commensuration is stripping away our humanity, what is the alternative?
It's tough.
Am I supposed to just guess who is doing a good job based on vibes? Am I supposed to tell HR, don't worry, I feel in my heart that Sarah is our best salesperson?
It is the ultimate excruciating managerial dilemma. You are absolutely right. You cannot abandon measurement entirely. Large-scale human cooperation requires some level of commensuration. But the solution to bad metrics isn't necessarily more metrics. It is better, more deeply contextualized measurement.
Right.
We will absolutely get to Van der Kolk's practical day-to-day solutions for managers in a few minutes. But before we look at how to fix this at the micro team level, we need to scale this problem up to its absolute maximum.
Okay, where are we going?
We need to see how this dynamic of quantification and indicatorism plays out, not just with individual employees, but on a massive global scale.
She's talking about how entire multinational corporations worth hundreds of billions of dollars are disciplined and controlled by external numbers.
Exactly. I want to transition into the research of Mohamed Shelley and Yves Gendron from 2013, which takes a hard look at the immense disciplinary power of sustainability ratings.
This is such a critical topic right now. Corporate sustainability, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, CSR, corporate social responsibility. These acronyms have become central social reference. Every Fortune 500 company has an ESG report. Shelley and Gendron describe this phenomenon as a tsunami of transparency.
And that tsunami didn't just happen organically. It was a direct, panicked response to massive, trust-destroying socio-ecological scandals in the late 20th and early 21st centuries.
Like what?
Think of the horrific Union Carbide chemical disaster in Bhopal, India, or the major corporate oil spills. Public trust in the corporate ecosystem was absolutely shattered. People viewed corporations as reckless monsters.
Right.
In response, the market felt a desperate need to restore order, accountability, and most importantly, public trust.
And how do we restore order in modern capitalism? We measure it. We commensurate it. The market created an ideology of numbers pushing for quantified sustainability. The
Yeah.
logic was,
Yeah.
if a massive oil company can prove with a certified dashboard of hard numbers that they are green and responsible, the public and investors might trust them again.
This gave rise to a hugely profitable new industry, sustainability rating agencies. Organizations like the Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes, DJSI Accountability, and Ethibel.
Okay.
These agencies position themselves as the ultimate objective arbiters of corporate goodness. But Shelley and Gundren aren't interested in the math these agencies use. They use a framework from cultural studies, specifically John B. Thompson's linguistic strategies, to analyze the discourse of these agencies.
The discourse.
They wanted to understand how these rating agencies use PR, language, and framing to justify their incredible market-moving power.
Let's break down those linguistic strategies,
Right.
because it reveals a tremendous amount about how power operates behind the scenes of a dashboard. The first strategy they identify is legitimation or rationalization.
Right. To be powerful, a rating agency first has to convince the global market that its metrics are actually valid and unbiased.
They have to seem legit.
They do this by presenting themselves as fiercely independent and rigorously scientific. They use the strategy of rationalization to create a logical, unquestionable chain of reasoning.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For example, in the sources, the agency OCOM explicitly and repeatedly claimed a profound scientific background and absolute financial independence from the companies they rate to legitimize their methodology.
Oh. And
They are essentially saying, do not question the rating we gave this company because the science behind it is flawless and we cannot be bought.
it's that appeal to mechanical objectivity we talked about earlier. Like, we aren't making subjective judgments. We're just neutral scientists crunching the objective numbers.
Exactly.
But the second strategy is a bit more manipulative. Dissimulation or euphemization.
This is all about masking the deeply coercive nature of what they're actually doing. Let's be clear. A rating agency exerts massive disciplinary pressure on a company.
Because if a CEO gets a bad ESG score, their stock price might tank.
Right. Massive institutional investors might flee, and they might lose their job. It is a threat. But the agencies don't frame it as a threat or a punishment. They use soft euphemisms.
Like what?
They claim they simply want to impulse a leverage effect for continuous improvement.
That is such corporate speak.
Isn't it? They frame their ratings not as a disciplinary whip, but as a helpful, friendly mirror.
We're not punishing you. We're just partnering with you to help you be your best corporate self.
Exactly. It completely masks the intense punitive power dynamic. And the third strategy is unification and fragmentation. This is perhaps the most socially powerful tool they have.
How did that work?
The rating agencies use their metrics to create strict binary boundaries between the goodies and the baddies in the corporate world.
They're drawing a massive line in the sand.
Yes. They unify the good companies into an exclusive elite club, like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and they aggressively fragment or exclude the bad ones.
Right.
The agency Ethibel takes this to the absolute extreme with a process the researchers call the expurgation of the other. Ethibel flat out excludes entire sectors, companies in the tobacco, weapons, or gambling industries from their investment registers entirely before they even run a single metric.
They are essentially saying, your very existence is fundamentally impure, and no amount of green energy usage or diverse hiring practices can save you. You are cast out.
If we connect this back to the broader sociological picture, Shelley and Gendron explicitly tie this rating agency behavior to the French philosopher Michel Foucault's concept of disciplinary power.
Oh, Foucault.
Foucault was obsessed with how modern societies define what is normal and what is abnormal, usually without using physical force, but through surveillance and categorization. These sustainability ratings act as a massive global mechanism of normalization.
So by defining the exact metric of what a sustainable company looks like, the rating agency literally dictates the new corporate normal.
Yes, it's like a global panopticon. And because they create this elite group of normal, good companies, the fear of exclusion from this group is terrifying for corporate executives.
Yeah.
That invisible fear, that disciplinary power forces companies to actively change their internal behavior, their supply chain logistics, their labor practices, just to ensure they fit the metric and stay in the club.
But just like the Dutch police reclassifying burglaries, the external metric often completely misses the internal reality. There's a deeply tragic, reductionist flaw in these ratings.
There really is.
The sources highlight an incredibly dark, devastating irony regarding this. In 2008, the agency Accountability ranked France Telecom in its top 10 most responsible companies in the entire world. They got a fantastic, highly publicized score.
But the reality on the ground for the human beings working there was horrific.
Right. While corporate leadership was celebrating this top-tier sustainability rating, over 20 employees at France Telecom had committed suicide.
It's awful.
And subsequent investigations linked this absolute tragedy directly to a deeply alienating, brutal labor management system within the company, which was undergoing intense restructuring and privatization.
Yeah.
The sustainability metric was completely, utterly blind to the actual lived reality of the human beings suffering inside the organization. The algorithm might have tracked paper recycling or corporate governance structures, but it completely failed to weigh employee mental health and survival against whatever green initiatives they were tracking.
Yeah, it's true.
The metric said the company was a beacon of responsibility while the people inside were dying.
It is the most extreme example of commensuration failing us. We see a similar, though less tragic, reductionist flaw with the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and BP.
Right, the oil spill.
BP was lauded for years as a highly sustainable, forward-thinking energy company. They were proudly featured on the index. And they were only removed from the index after the massive Deepwater Horizon Gulf of Mexico oil spill happened.
Wow.
The metric didn't predict the systemic risk, it didn't prevent the disaster, it only reacted to the PR fallout after the fact.
Which proves, yet again, that the map is not the territory. But companies aren't just sitting there passively taking this abuse, right?
Yeah.
If you are a CEO and you know a flawed metric can destroy your company's valuation, you don't just sit back and let a rating agency dictate your fate.
Absolutely not. They fight back. This is what the researchers refer to as the rating game. Because corporate managers know exactly how high the financial stakes are, they actively engage in negotiating with the rating agencies.
Yeah, they lobby them.
They lobby them heavily. They hire entire armies of consultants to tweak their corporate disclosures to perfectly match the agency's specific algorithm.
It's corporate indicatorism on a global scale.
Yeah.
They aren't trying to save the planet. They're trying to ace the test.
Exactly. They aren't necessarily changing the fundamental DNA of the company to be better for the Earth. They are changing the optics of the company to be better for the metric. They are playing the game.
Okay, so we've seen how subjective, easily gamed, and sometimes tragically flawed these sustainability ratings are. But I want to pivot to something even larger. What happens when we try to use hard economic science, the most rigorous, peer-reviewed commensuration possible, to tackle the ultimate global problem? I want to look at how we measure the social cost of carbon.
This is where commensuration reaches its absolute zenith. It is the boldest attempt in human history to put a single, universally accepted dollar value on the global, multi-generational, incredibly complex impact of climate change.
Before we dive into the mechanics of this, I want to set the stage impartially. For the listener, please note that we are looking at this strictly from a methodological, economic, and managerial perspective.
Right.
We are drawing directly on a highly influential 2022 study published in the journal Nature by Renard et al. We are not taking political sides on climate policy or the energy transition.
No, not at all.
Our mission here is strictly to report on the factual mechanics of how economists attempt to do the impossible, to commensurate a looming global crisis into a single cell on a spreadsheet.
It is a staggering mathematical and philosophical task. The metric they are attempting to calculate is called the social cost of carbon, or the SCCO2. By definition, the SCCO2 is the monetized value of the net damage to society caused by adding exactly 1 metric ton of CO2 to the atmosphere today.
1 ton. What is the exact financial damage of that one specific ton across the entire globe forever? How do economists even begin to build an equation for that?
The study outlines 4 incredibly complex, distinct steps in the modeling process. First, they have to predict future emissions and socioeconomic growth.
Okay.
They literally have to model how many human beings will exist on the planet in the year 2100 and how wealthy those people will be.
Which is Hard enough on its own.
Very. Second, they model the physical climate response, how those projected emissions translate into actual physical temperature increases, changes in precipitation, and sea level rise.
Which, given the complexity of the Earth's atmosphere, is incredibly difficult.
Extremely difficult. Third, they have to monetize those physical impacts. They take those modeled physical climate changes and translate them into hard economic damages across various sectors.
Like what?
They have to predict agricultural crop yields in a hotter world. They have to put a dollar price on human health and mortality caused by heat waves. They have to estimate future energy expenditures, how much more air conditioning will cost.
Right.
They have to value coastal infrastructure that might be flooded. They have to put a dollar price on all of that 100 years from now.
The audacity of trying to calculate the dollar value of a heat stroke in the year 2085 is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And what's step 4?
Step 4 is where the heaviest economic philosophy comes into play. Discounting. They have to take all of those projected future damages, stretching hundreds of years into the future, and discount them back to a single present-day dollar value.
Okay, let's pause and dig into discounting, because this is where the math becomes profoundly ethical. Discounting is a concept that trips up a lot of people who don't spend their days in corporate finance or macroeconomics. How should a manager understand this?
The sheer weight of the discounting choice is fascinating. The researchers in the Nature study use what is known as a Ramsey-like discounting framework. It's a complex equation that accounts for several interlocking factors: our societal preferences regarding risk, the uncertainty in future economic growth, and something called the intertemporal elasticity of substitution.
Okay, you're definitely losing me with the heavy jargon. Intertemporal elasticity of substitution. Can I offer a simpler analogy to ground this?
Please do.
Discounting is essentially like deciding how much a crisp $100 bill printed in the year 2050 is worth to me right now, today, in my pocket.
Right.
If I use a high discount rate, let's say 5%, it means I heavily discount the future. That future $100 is basically worthless to me today. I barely care about it because I assume society will be vastly richer later, or because I'd rather have the money right now to invest in something else.
Exactly.
But if I use a low discount rate, say 1% or 2%, it means I value that future $100 almost as much as I value a $100 bill in my pocket today. A low discount rate means I view the economic pain of future generations almost equally to my own economic pain today.
That is a very accurate, accessible way to put it. The discount rate mathematically represents how much wealth we are willing to sacrifice today to prevent a dollar of damage tomorrow. And this exact choice is where the Run It All study shakes the very foundation of corporate environmental planning.
All right, let's look at the actual numbers they produced. For years, the U.S. federal government used estimates that relied heavily on a 3% near-term discount rate. Under that 3% rate, the social cost of carbon were officially calculated to be around $51 per ton of CO2.
$51. That was the benchmark. That was the number entered into the spreadsheets for regulatory cost-benefit analyses.
Okay.
But the 2022 Nature study completely rebuilt and updated the models. They updated the socioeconomic inputs, they updated the damage functions, particularly bringing in state-of-the-art, much more granular data on human mortality and energy expenditures, and crucially, they argued that a 3% discount rate was too high.
Based on updated market data and expert consensus, they suggested a preferred 2% near-term discount rate. And what did changing that single percentage point do to the final price?
It caused a massive tectonic spike in the cost. By dropping the discount rate from 3% to 2% and updating the scientific damage functions, their preferred estimate for the social cost of carbon rocketed from $51 to $185 per ton. And that is just the mean estimate. Their 5% to 95% confidence range spans all the way from $44 up to $413 per ton.
And if they push the discount rate even lower, down to 1.5%, which many environmental economists argue is more ethically appropriate because it doesn't severely devalue the lives of people born 50 years from now, the cost jumps to an astonishing 388 parts per ton.
Exactly. From a benchmark of $51 all the way to $185 or even $308 based on tweaking the discounting philosophy and updating the mortality data.
So tying this back to our audience, if I am a supply chain manager for a global retailer or a CFO evaluating whether to build a new natural gas plant versus a massive solar array, why do I care about a macroeconomic paper in Nature?
You care deeply because this single metric literally reshapes the future landscape of global business. If regulatory bodies, governments, or even internal corporate carbon pricing schemes adopt a $185 per ton metric instead of $51 metric, your entire internal cost-benefit analysis breaks down overnight and has to be completely rebuilt.
The math completely flips.
Exactly. Imagine an infrastructure project, say a new fossil fuel reliant factory. It might look highly profitable on a spreadsheet when carbon pollution only costs society $51 a ton. But if you have to factor in a cost of $185 a ton, that exact same project suddenly projects a massive catastrophic net loss.
It changes everything.
It shifts the ROI on capital investments, global logistics, and ESG policies radically toward greener alternatives. This is the ultimate example of how choosing a metric, and specifically choosing a philosophical discount rate, actively intervenes in reality. The number isn't just measuring the global economy, it is forcefully steering the global economy.
It's the alchemy of commensuration on a planetary scale.
Indeed, it proves that the metrics we choose dictate the future we build.
Okay. We have gone on an incredible heavy journey today. We started with Plato and Aristotle arguing over the philosophy of measurement. We looked at the hidden factories of statisticians building the GDP. We explored the psychological dangers of indicatorism and the Dutch police. We exposed the disciplinary whip of sustainability ratings. And finally, we tackled global carbon economics.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. And it is very easy to feel completely overwhelmed right now by the sheer power and the terrifying built-in flaws of metrics.
It can certainly induce a sense of managerial paralysis if every metric is a simplification, if every indicator can be gamed, and if commensuration strips away our humanity. What do we actually do on Monday morning?
Right. I want to ground this firmly back in the day-to-day life of a manager. How do we do this better? We promise solutions, so let's synthesize the problem. We know we cannot escape numbers. As we established, commensuration is completely necessary for modern complex life. You cannot run a global supply chain on qualitative poetry and good vibes.
Right.
But we can escape indicatorism. We can escape the blind worship of mechanical objectivity.
And this brings us right back to van der Kolk's 2022 research. He doesn't just diagnose the disease, he provides highly practical advice for managers to reclaim their metrics and mitigate these human and organizational costs.
So if I'm looking at a flawed dashboard, how do I fix my team's relationship with these numbers?
Van der Kolk's first major piece of advice centers on co-creation. Do not just sit in an isolated executive boardroom, consult with a few data scientists, and impose metrics from the top down. You have to design your performance measurement systems with the stakeholders who are actually going to be impacted by them.
So talk to the people doing the work.
Yes. If you are measuring the performance of a call center, you need to involve the call center workers in choosing and defining the KPIs. Research consistently shows that this massively increases employee commitment and drastically reduces the urge to game the system because the employees feel a sense of ownership over the metric. They understand why it's being measured.
Which is incredibly hard for control freak managers to do because it requires giving up some authority. What else does he suggest?
He urges managers to ruthlessly keep the ultimate goal in mind and to constantly audit their metrics against that goal. You have to always ask yourself if the metric is actively thwarting the actual organizational objective. Van der Kolk uses a great example of teaching evaluations at universities. The goal of a university is to educate students rigorously. But if a professor realizes that the only way to get a high evaluation score from students is to dumb down the course material, remove the difficult readings, and give everyone an A, then the evaluation metric is actively destroying the goal of higher education.
That makes total sense.
The metric hurts the goal. You have to be brave enough to ditch the metric.
But how do we solve the Aristotle problem? How do we fix the fact that commensuration strips away the nuance of the human experience?
By actively putting the nuance back in. Van der Kolk advises that you should never, ever rely solely on the number. You have to add a robust qualitative context.
Like what?
Use interviews, peer narratives, long-form stories, and detailed qualitative descriptions to provide the depth that the spreadsheet removes. The number tells you what happened. The qualitative context tells you why it happened.
And this leads to what I think is the absolute hardest part of this for a modern corporation.
Yeah.
Allowing subjective flexibility.
It is the hardest because it pushes back directly against that comforting mechanical objectivity we rely on to avoid blame. Van der Kolk argues that you need to bring a limited conscious amount of human managerial subjectivity back into the evaluation process.
But HR departments hate subjectivity. Subjectivity invites bias, it invites favoritism, it invites lawsuits. They want an objective algorithm.
That's the tension. But as we've seen, the algorithm is often biased anyway. It's just hidden behind math. A rigid algorithm will punish an employee who misses their sales target because they spent 3 weeks helping a struggling colleague, or because their territory was hit by a natural disaster.
Right.
A subjective, observant manager can look at that broader context and say, the number on the dashboard is bad, but your actual performance and your contribution to the team's culture was exactly what we needed. You have to allow managers to manage.
And finally, he suggests a complete mindset shift in how we view the numbers themselves.
Yes. Treat the indicator as the beginning of a conversation, not the end. Metrics should never be the final executioner's verdict. If a KPI is flashing red on your dashboard, it is not a mandate to immediately fire someone. It is an invitation for interdepartmental learning, for curiosity, and for cooperation. Ask why it's red before you react.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening? It means that metrics are tools, not masters. I love to think of it like driving a car. A good manager uses a dashboard to check their speed, to make sure the engine isn't overheating, to see if they need gas.
Sure.
It's vital information. But the dashboard is just there to help you ask better questions about the state of the vehicle. You would never, ever stare exclusively at the dashboard while driving 100 miles an hour down the highway. To actually drive the car, to keep everyone safe and reach your destination, you have to look up.
You have to.
You have to look out the windshield at the actual, messy, unpredictable, real world in front of you.
Because if you only stare at the dashboard, you will inevitably crash. The map is not the territory.
Let's recap the massive ground we covered today. We started with the alchemy of commensuration, exploring how we strip away context to turn the messy qualities of human labor into clean, comparable quantities. We looked at the immense hidden labor of statisticians and the seductive aesthetics of data that trick our brains into trusting those numbers unconditionally.
We did.
We dove deep into the dark side of indicatorism, seeing how employees will actively game the system and lose sight of the mission if the metric demands it. We explored how entire corporations are disciplined by the discourse of sustainability ratings, which often completely miss the human tragedy happening inside the walls.
Yeah.
And we saw how tweaking a single philosophical percentage point in the discounting rate of the social cost of carbon can literally shift billions of dollars in global capital and reshape our response to climate change.
It is a stark reminder that every spreadsheet you open is a political document. Every KPI you assign is a philosophical choice about what matters and what doesn't.
It has been a heavy, deep dive, but we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to carry into your next week of work.
We know that the act of commensuration forces us to focus only on what can be easily measured and quantified. So ask yourself this about your own team or your own organization. What highly valuable, totally incommensurable behavior is secretly keeping your company afloat right now? Is it a specific middle manager's incredible empathy during a crisis? Is it the unmeasured, undocumented mentorship happening in the break room that keeps junior staff from quitting? Is it the psychological safety someone provides that doesn't show up on a productivity tracker?
And what will happen to your team if you accidentally destroy that invisible magic by trying to put a number on it?
It is something to seriously mull over the next time you sit down to write a performance review.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you're leading a massive division or just trying to navigate the metric of your own career, we appreciate your curiosity and your commitment to learning the deeper mechanics of the business world. Remember to keep looking out the windshield, not just at the dashboard. We'll see you on the next one.